Hello, class. All right. This is one of the first ones I ever used right here. Now, listen up. We're going to do this alphabetically. Noah. And the zebras are like, damn. It's pretty funny. Oh, crap. Is that today? Dinosaurs getting left behind. Oh, there you go. Take a look. That's me. Yeah, well, Hey. And one-wheel motorcycle. Top speed, 93 miles an hour. In the future, this guy's dead. And there's my far side for the week. Dog trying to trap the cat in there. Please, please. Cat food, cat food. All right, hope everyone's doing all right. I'm a little late on this imperialism lecture, but I notice most people check in on Sundays, so sometimes I post them late. Sometimes I post them early, depending on which class you're in. Empires. It's probably one of the most boring chapters that probably put you to sleep no matter how long I've been teaching and doing this. I can't seem to get people excited about imperialism. I don't know why. Empires, they strike back, as we've talked about, the direct, indirect, formal, informal control or extension control of a people, state, or nation over another. So empire can be by conquest, invitation, anything. So the question we always have to ask ourselves, as you can see up above there, are only Americans imperialists, or only Europeans? No, everyone is and have been over time. Just the easy way to answer is in our relative, not when we were born in the 2000s, but our time of looking at history, the 17, 18, 1900s, it's mainly been Europeans controlling other people. Okay? So the question is America an imperialist nation? Dun, 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 dun. It's Jeopardy tune. Think about it. Have we ever had that? Direct, indirect, formal, informal? So you're doing your critical thinking right now, and the answer is yes, of course we are. Now, what's amazing about America is, if you read the chapter, you'll find we're hardly talked about at all in this chapter on world history, a little bit at the end in there, but for the most part, George Washington, Jorge W is how I call him, two things he says in his farewell address: don't get involved in foreign affairs and don't have political parties. Way to go, America, to screw up both things that he said not to do. And what you'll find out is there's still some debate on this. I don't take this for absolute fact, but America pretty much stays out of the empirical world until, some people argue it's the 1860s or whatever it is, when we purchased Alaska, 1870s with this, but usually people call William McKinley around the 1890s when we start getting places like the Hawaiian Islands, kind of illegally, not kind of, but illegally, Guam, the Philippines, the early 1900s, and all these things. But for the first couple 150 years, we do a great job of saying, hey, let everyone be their own person. Today, I don't think there's any argument after World War II that we are an imperialist nation, and we try to be nice about it, and we Americans hate to admit that we're imperialist. Think of a direct place we imperialize. Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? I'd say Vietnam. Indirect. Anyone? I would say Korea. Formal, informal. Well, we start off informal in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we turn, formal, then we switch it to an informal to try to get them to take over their own country and their own security. It's a tough gig. It always has been, and it's not getting any easier. So have a look at this. As you can see, take a look at that. Europe comes to dominate in the last 150 years in the 1800s. On the eve of World War I, which is from 1914 to 1918, Britain, France, Belgium, Holland, and Germany, less than 1% of the world's land surface and 8% of its population, controls 25% of the world's population. That's a pretty big deal, all right? And so these reasons, here's something you need to know for the exam and just for life and to know this chapter. I'll tell you, and then we'll kind of skip through this because, again, this chapter can be a bit daunting. There's a link that you should know for this. And it's, again, not set in stone, but typically this is what you see to help you understand. 4 things. When countries have revolutions or enlightenments and enlighten their people, which is a big theme we've already talked about, the next thing that happens is what we talked about last week, industrialization. Then this week what we talk about is once countries are enlightened, they industrialize, they will naturally need to imperialize because they need to go out and get more raw materials and sell to more people. And finally, the 4th part of that I like to tie in is what happens when every nation, many nations, put it that way, do that. What happens? You have world wars. So think about that and try to look at it in historical context. Close your eyes, it helps. Everybody close your eyes and hum with me. Okay. I don't know if anyone even listens to these, but if you do, I'm sure you're cracking up a few times. Think about it. France, America, all kinds of countries. They have some kind of revolution. What we mean by that enlightenment is, I'll make it clear. Monarchies, kings, queens, sultans, emperors, whatever, people, rulers get out of the way, at least somewhat, of people so that they can focus on what? Making money, selling goods, having a commodity, and they're not worried about the government killing them or taxing them to the point of not being able to exist. The next thing is people will be inclined to industrialize, to become industrious people, to have modern stuff. They will next want to sell that to other people and need more goods, so they will naturally imperialize. And then when all that, even though they're in other countries or continents like Africa, they will still fight over this idea of what's right and whose is whose, and they will eventually lead to world wars. Okay, and that one there was one of the Industrial Revolution. The next one, national grandeur. Come on, I mean, people, right? People want the idea of we're the greatest race in the world, as you can see there, the English are, spreading their ideas. Americans still feel this way today. Moral purpose. Come on. I mean, white man's burden. I think it's going to be your primary source response, maybe, in this class. Moral purpose. Spreading Christianity at the time. Indirect, direct, assimilation, association. The greatest example of imperialism at this time is the British East India Company. It fills a vacuum that the decaying Mughal Empire has fallen apart, and Britain goes in with factories and forts, and then eventually when it collapses and there's chaos, they take over, starting with factories and goods and commodities, and then they say, we now have to protect this. And this is a very common theme. America does this in Vietnam. We send all these advisors to Vietnam and say, oh, no, they're just here helping the people out, and as soon as they're attacked, which they're foreigners in a country, we say, oh, now we have to protect them, and we must escalate this into war. England wants India. Why? Look at it. Full of raw materials. So they imperialize India. And the long story short is, no, the Sepoy Mutiny Rebellion. I don't have time to go over the whole thing, but the British are using Indian soldiers who are sepoys to keep everyone in line. There's a mutiny over the idea of beef fat or lard that's on the casings. Muslims and Hindus don't eat meat, and there's a rebellion against the British. It's pretty bad. And instead of the British fleeing and running, they lock down and tighten up on India even more. Let's learn from the English, who with 250,000 men in all, including 50,000 soldiers, only govern 400 million Indians. You got it. Adolf Hitler will say that. Did say that. And on the eve of the invasion of the Soviet Union, when Germany has a population of, I think, 80 million, and the Soviet Union, you could correct me, but somewhere has 600, 700, 500 million, something like that. 5, 6 times the population. And they think, well, we can't conquer it. And he uses England as an example. So know that direct rule comes after the Sepoy Mutiny. Direct rule. The British say, hey, we can't let these Indians do anything. We have to have, as you can see there somewhere, for every one, maybe it's on the next slide. No, it's there somewhere. I'm sorry. For every one British soldier, there's 3 Indian soldiers. We have to have a British soldier to keep them in line. India is defended because of its strategic location. Russia, Burma, Malaya, and Afghanistan. This is a great picture that we're probably just not going to have time to go over, but in case you can't tell, this is in Afghanistan, and that is a poppy field full of millions of dollars of heroin poppies. Afghanistan's turned into the #1 trading country of opium since we have invaded it. But there are some benefits. Today we think of imperialism as completely negative. Some would argue that, but there's some positive to it. English-speaking schools, a school system, some dispersion of democracy. Supposedly, India is the largest democracy in the world today. An infrastructure of telegraphs, railroads, as you guys can see. And thuggy. You might want to know that. Abolishment of thuggy. It's where we get the word thug. And it's a plundering and robbing system of professional robbers that stay on the roadsides and rob all these trucks that are taking materials and goods out. And you can't have that if you're going to imperialize a place and you need it for profit. Quinine is an interesting story. It prevents malaria, and it's found in the root of a tree that you see right there. Quinine. Okay, sati. Here's another definite benefit, I would argue. But sati is this practice, if you read about it in the chapter, that Indian women, many of them, especially conservative ones, when their husbands die, they throw themselves alive on the funeral pyre, because without a man, they're worth nothing. This is just, I mean, as old school as it gets. but it's really showing the sexism that's been embedded in Indian culture of this time. And the British are horrified of this when they see it. And here are some of these pictures. Some women supposedly do it willingly. Others have to be tossed on. I don't know what is more horrifying, but both of them are to me. That's my view on it. Okay, the last time Chuck Norris cried, the earth flooded. Sorry, Noah. Know this about Indochina. Indochina is what we call Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, Malaya, and all of that today. The French invaded in 1857, and they forced the Vietnamese to accept French protection that the Vietnamese don't need. China invades Vietnam in 111 pre-baby Jesus. And what the Vietnamese will argue is the Americans in 1960s, when they show up, are just one of a long line of many people who have tried to force foreign or colonial rule on the Vietnamese. If you don't know, and you're going to find out in this class, before our war in Vietnam, the Vietnamese fight a losing, the French fight a losing war in Indochina against the Vietnamese, called the Viet Minh, from 1946 till 1954. And they lose their empire. And they tell America, stay out of Vietnam, it's a mess. But we don't listen. And they go there because they want rubber, which comes from trees, as you can see right there. Who thought rubber ever came from trees? I sure didn't. And so as you can see here, what's important about this is you see this Southeast Asia. Look at all this. European countries are taking over and imperializing this area. Now, what's so important is one, Europeans are controlling Asians, and we've just had this big idea of revolutions and liberalism, and who should be controlling people's areas? Who should be doing this? Well, their own people should. Well, that's what we think as Americans, right? Who should be in charge of America's destiny? Americans. Well, look what Europeans do. They go all around the globe saying, you should be in charge of your own destiny, just not you. And more importantly, take a look at this. Very, very interesting. In the 1940s, when the Nazis invade the world, look at where do all these soldiers that are stationed here in this areas go? They go back to Europe to fight the Nazis. And who swoops down and takes every bit of this? You got it. China? No. Vietnam? No. Filipino? No. The Japanese. And the Japanese will simply say, hey, this is our backyard and this is our area and we will control it. And that's going to create a problem. Okay? As I clicked on something, now I have to fix it. Sorry. There we go. I don't talk much about the Spanish-American War. To hell with Spain. Remember the Maine. Look it up is all I can tell you. I'm trying to get through this so we can kind of get through in one lecture. I don't know if I can do it. African imperialism is, again, no one has touched Africa. The slave trade has well been abolished by the 1880s and so, but Africa has not been touched. So Europeans go there, and it's called the Scramble for Africa. They meet in Berlin. This is the fascinating part. The Europeans meet in Berlin. They invite no one from Africa, and they carve the entire continent up. And no African states are invited. And here it is right here, a map. It shows you. And this is going to be a legacy of imperialism and racism and terrible rule. Some would argue even today, but definitely until the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Okay? We're going to skip that. Muhammad Ali. I mean, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. I'm so mean I make medicine sick. Okay? Last night I hit the light switch. I was in the bed before the light was out. One of the greatest talkers ever and greatest boxers. But who is he really? He's really the Pasha. And long story short is he takes over Egypt. Muhammad Ali, the real Muhammad Ali, not Cassius Clay. The Suez Canal is being built by a French company, but later controlled by the British because the French can't really finish anything except a bottle of cheese and wine and evidently win the World Cup. And so Muhammad Ali sees the Europeans coming and says, hey, it's better to work with them, so again, informal, than to have formal control over them where they just take over you. So we know it's coming, let's brace for it, and let's work with them so we're not imperialized as much. And in the next part of the chapter 22, you're going to look at between Japan and China. You need to figure out which one does that, Japan or China? Which one gets controlled like that? It's no mystery. If you read, you'll find out. So the Suez, they want the Suez to shorten it by 2 months. Or so, the month or so, the trip, because they want access for trading to East Asia. And again, if you don't know this, one of the consequences is the heart of darkness, racism, underdevelopment, and then eventually African resistance movements and African nationalism that will come around. Okay, please place your donation in the envelope along with the deceased person you want remembered. Right, it's a big envelope. This is the thing we have at our house for our guard dog because of the Basset Hound. Losing your teeth in 3, 2, like that one. Okay, let's talk about Japan and China, but let's do it in the next little mini lecture. Okay?